What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja, and last week we got this really indie game from this unknown publisher called Starfield, and I'm about 20-ish hours into it, so obviously I want to talk about it. So without further ado, let's rock. And like I just said, I'm about 18 to 20-ish hours into this game, and Starfield is a massive, massive game. As much as I like doing full reviews for everybody, I don't know if there's a way that I could have physically gotten through this game. Not that I would have wanted to rush through the game anyways, but I just think it would have been impossible for me to have gotten through this entire game the way that I want to play it in time for a full review. So I'm just gonna call this video my first impressions. Starfield had its wide release on September 6th. That's the day that I started playing it, but if you paid extra and got the premium edition, you could have played it a few days earlier. It was developed and published by Bethesda, which is owned by Microsoft, so obviously this was exclusive to PC and Xbox Series S and X. I played this day one Game Pass on my brand new all black emo Series S. In Starfield, you play as a new mining employee that during a job stumbles upon an artifact that gets the attention of a space exploration group called the Constellation, who recruits you to their organization. Starfield is actually Bethesda's first original IP in about 25 years, so it's gotten a lot of hype. And if I'm being 100% honest, which I like to do in these videos, I have to admit that I'm not a huge Bethesda fanboy. They've made some great games in the past, but they haven't always been my cup of tea. So for better or for worse, I'm not gonna pull my punches with Starfield. If you were hyped for Starfield and are loving the game, that's awesome. I'm genuinely happy for you. Keep loving this game. Don't let any stranger on the internet tell you any different. But personally, after my first 18 to 20 hours of Starfield, the game left me wanting a lot more. I kept thinking that this game just almost nailed it. It was so close to being a great game, like game of the year great. But it just left me wanting a little bit more. And a lot of the hype for Starfield is the fact that Bethesda promised a lot with this game. And as I was playing it, I couldn't help but think that they got just enough done where people can't accuse them of being liars, but it felt like a lot of it was half measures. And the biggest letdown of Starfield by far for me is the space exploration. It just didn't feel natural. You don't actually feel like a pilot in Starfield. You get your first spaceship, the Frontier, really early in this game, and I was really excited. I was like, let's fucking go. I wanted to jump into my spaceship, fly around, and find cool shit. It was by far my favorite part of No Man's Sky. Unfortunately, with Starfield, the flying around part is what's disappointing. You don't actually do any real flying. Takeoff and landing are just cutscenes, and any actual flying mostly consists of navigating menus. When you want to go to a planet, you open a map, you select that planet, and then you grav jump to it. And all of those are just cutscenes. And then once you pop out the other side and you get to that planet, the police of that planet, the Popo, will scan you for contraband when you get there, which I know it doesn't sound like much, but it gets really annoying when you jump from planet to planet and you have to wait 20 to 30 seconds for them to scan you. Also, you can't just land wherever on the planet. When you first get to a brand new planet, you have to scan it, find the designated landing spots, and then push the button to land. And again, that just initiates another cutscene. I have seen other streamers try to navigate space without using the maps and without grav jumping, and it takes forever to get anywhere without jumping, which I honestly kind of like because it is space. It should take a while to get to places. My biggest problem with that is the flying isn't actually fun. there's no feeling of momentum in Starfield. Going 90 speed feels exactly like going 1 speed. There was actually a couple of times, and this is kind of embarrassing to admit, where I was trying to do something manually early on in the game, and I thought to myself, why is this taking so long? It was because I was going 0 speed. I wasn't actually moving, but I couldn't tell that because, again, there doesn't feel like there's any momentum in this game. I will give them slight credit, and I know this is going to be a weird thing, but it happens so frequently, and it was weirdly satisfying to me for some reason. When you first get into the cockpit, you'll like pull the console close to you and like hit a couple of buttons, and I don't know why, every single time I did it, I was like, just do the thing, I wanted you to do the thing, and it was like weirdly satisfying to me, so that was kind of fun. And unfortunately, there's not as much space combat as I was expecting. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't expecting this game to be Star Wars Squadrons or anything like that, but I was expecting a little bit more. And maybe it was just because when you first get your spaceship and you first go out into space, because the game wants to show you how to actually do space combat, you do come across a pirate ship and you have to fight them. So maybe I just had that expectation in my head. And to be honest, I got so bored with the flying, it could definitely be the fact that I just grab jump pretty much everywhere in this game past the first like 5 hours because I was so bored with the actual flying. So maybe I'm not giving this game as much credit as it necessarily deserves, but there wasn't as much dogfighting as I expected. It's fine when you do get it, but there's just not enough of it in this game. Speaking of combat, Starfield is a lot more combat heavy than I originally thought it was going to be. There are long stretches of it basically just being a first person or third person shooter depending on what camera angle you're using. And I suppose I shouldn't be super surprised because they did show off a lot of combat during their deep dive. And if you've seen any of my past reviews, you know I'm not personally much of a gun guy. I think I've only fired a real gun, twice in my whole life. That being said, I am a pretty big fan of first-person shooters. It's probably my second favorite genre, second to only platformers. And I have this weird thing about shooters where I want the gun to feel fun when it gets fired. Also, it needs to be fun when I reload it. Because obviously, with first-person shooters or shooters in general, you're constantly shooting and reloading your gun. So I want it to be fun. And Starfield, it's adequate in both of those areas, but it's certainly not my favorite either. To give them credit, there is a double barrel shotgun that's really, really fun to reload. I would suggest playing most of the main quests at the beginning, kind of getting it out of the way. We'll get into that here in a little bit, but much of the main quests early on, which again, I think going back to what I said about space combat, I think it's mostly like this because the game wants you to get used to doing the combat. But a lot of the main quests early on are go to this planet, there's an enemy base, and then just keep firing until everybody's dead, and then loot their bodies once they're dead and kind of rinse and repeat. Unfortunately, early on, the enemies are very bullet spongy. I'm also a bullet sponge, so the combat got kind of boring. It got to the point where I would literally be in the middle of combat and I would be so bored that I would just like whip out my machete and go full like horror slasher on them, which sounds a lot more psychotic saying it out loud than I thought it would in my head. I'll be quick with this last point as far as the combat's concerned, because I don't know how much it'll actually affect other gamers, but if you're anything like me, this will bother you. So as you're exploring all these different planets, and there's so many planets to explore in this game, you will come across wildlife, and more often than not, they are hostile, which I don't love. Killing wildlife in video games. I am an animal lover myself, and I know it doesn't really matter. It just kind of rubs me the wrong way. So there's a lot of that in Starfield. So if that bothers you like it bothered me, then you're not going to love a lot of Starfield. And one big criticism I heard going into Starfield is that the main quest is going to take a while to get interesting, and I definitely agree. The main quest, the story, is definitely a slow burn. Much of the main quest at the beginning is just one big fetch quest. You go to this planet and get an artifact. Now you take it back to your home base. Now you go to this other planet and get another artifact, and kind of rinse and repeat. I get it. This game is massive. It's built to play for 50-ish hours at bare minimum. I'm 18 hours into it. I haven't done a ton of main quests because I do a lot of side stuff. I get distracted really easily, but I'm 18 hours into it and the main quest is now just getting interesting. However, there's a ton of really fun side quest stuff to do. I got distracted really easily once I got to New Atlantis. There's a ton of like weird activities that you can do. I spent a ton of time, at least 2 hours of the 18-ish hours I've played this game, just helping this one scientist with this tree that he's obsessed with. And I don't know why, but I got really invested into this tree. You can also join factions in Starfield. Call me Buzz Lightyear because I joined the Space Rangers, and it's basically consisted of me just bouncing from planet to planet, investigating all these crimes. I started off by talking this bank robber into releasing his hostages. I just now finishing up a spaceship heist investigation, and it's been a lot of fun. And this, of course, wasn't done by accident because I've played Bethesda games in the past, but I made sure I was proficient in persuasion, and it's really, really helped me with my space rangering. There's been a lot of times where I've had to interrogate somebody and they'll be like, I'm a hardened criminal, you'll never break me. And I'm like, persuade. And they're like, that's a good point, I will tell you everything. And one thing that I really appreciate about the skill tree in Starfield is it's not your normal get a bunch of XP. That gives you skill points and you can kind of dump skill points in whatever skill that you want, which is basically the skill tree that you see in every other RPG. Now there is an element of that in Starfield, especially with the level 1 of each skill, but past level 1, you actually have to do things relevant to that skill to unlock the other levels. I've already talked about the persuade perk. Once you unlock level 1, I think you have to convince 5 people. You have to persuade 5 different people to unlock level 2. And then level 3, I think it's 10 people. And it just kind of feels more immersive. You're not just good at a thing because you dumped random skill points into that skill. You're good at it because you spent time doing the thing that's relevant to that skill, which is how real life works. Now, I do feel bad because I feel like I buried the lead with Starfield. There's been a lot of chatter about how this game looks, and to be honest, how bad this game looks. And I don't want to feel like I'm piling on with this first impressions video, but I do have to give my honest opinion, and that is, it looks outdated to me. I don't necessarily agree that it looks bad. It just looks like an older game. I played this on my Series S, and you're probably thinking, well, you're just pissed off because they locked console at 30 frames per second. If you've never seen any of my other review videos, I know I've mentioned this on past videos, I don't give a shit about frames per second. I play games all the time on my handheld Switch. I play games all the time on my handheld Steam Deck. Games can still look good at 30 frames per second. So it literally has nothing to do with that. It's the fact that I'm playing a brand new game from a huge AAA studio on a console that's less than 3 years old, and it looks like I'm playing a remastered game from 10 years ago. Now, to give them credit, there are moments very similar to how I felt when I was playing No Man's Sky, where I would just be exploring a random planet and I would just stop and take it all in and be like, man, this is really cool. Just kind of look out on the horizon and just think about how cool it is that I'm playing this game. So it's certainly not all bad, but as I've already mentioned a few times, most of this game is just having conversations with people. And that looks really, really bad. And I'm not the only one that thinks that. My wife actually walked in while I was having a conversation with somebody in this game. And she was like, I thought you said that this was a new game. And I was like, it is. And she's like, oh, you mean like it's a remastered new game? And I was like, no, it is a brand new game that came out last week. And she just went, yikes. Which really sucks because I thought the voice cast was great. My favorite character so far is definitely Sam. The actor sounds like he's doing his best Justified impression, and I love every second of it. I have also seen a lot of people complain about how buggy Starfield is. I think some of that has to do with the fact that Bethesda, unfortunately, is kind of notorious for releasing buggy games. But as I've said a couple of times in this video already, I played this day one on Game Pass on my Series S, and I feel like the people that are complaining the loudest about this game being buggy are the people that played it early. I'm not making excuses for Bethesda. I definitely feel like, especially considering those people paid more money for the privilege of playing a buggy game, Bethesda has plenty of money. They should be releasing games without bugs for sure. It's just me personally, in the almost 20 hours I've played the game, haven't really seen that many bugs. So it's possible, again, not to give them any excuses, because you should just release a game without bugs to begin with, but it's possible that they've already been cleaned up. The closest thing that I've seen that I would consider a bug was really just kind of funny. So I've already mentioned Sam earlier, but when you recruit characters into your crew in Starfield, they can actually go on missions with you. They'll actually follow you. And occasionally, as I've mentioned before, a lot of these missions are just having conversations with people, and they will actually butt into the conversation. And Sam was with me on a mission because he's my BFF, and he butted into my conversation, but he wasn't actually in the room for whatever reason. He was still standing outside the door. So the camera just cut to the door, but you could hear Sam's voice. It was really weird. It wasn't a game-breaking bug or anything like that. It just kind of broke my immersion a little bit. It kind of made me laugh, but that was the biggest bug I've seen. Again, I don't want anyone to feel like I'm letting Bethesda off the hook. They should be able to make a game. They have plenty of money. They should be able to make a game without bugs. Just look at Baldur's Gate 3. I personally haven't gotten a chance to play it yet, but that is a game just as massive as Starfield, and I didn't hear about bugs at all with that game. And that's a smaller studio as well. So it's possible to make a game without bugs. But that being said, this is the worst Starfield is gonna look. Bethesda isn't gonna give up on this game. Xbox is not gonna let them give up on this game. So this is the worst Starfield is gonna look. Well, considering this isn't a full review and it's just my first impressions, I won't give Starfield a star rating because I haven't actually played the entire game. But like I mentioned earlier, I do feel that this game was so close to being a great game. I have been having a lot of fun with it, just not as much fun as I thought I was going to. But of course, those are just my opinions on Starfield. I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below. As I said earlier, if you were hyped for this game and you're really enjoying it and you think it's a great game, that is fantastic. I love that for you. Don't let me change your opinion at all. But I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you smash that like button. That really helps me out. It's just kind of a free way to tell YouTube that you enjoyed the video and that you want other people to see the video because you think it's good. Of course, if you especially like the video, consider subscribing. And again, it's free. You can ding that bell. That way you get notified every time I post another video. I do plan on doing a full review of Mortal Kombat 1 next week. And then maybe if I get time, I might do a first impressions of Lies of P if I have time to play that game, because they're technically being released on the same day. So we'll see how that goes. But if you like that type of content, definitely consider subscribing and dinging that bell. But until next video, take it easy. What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja, and this is my boy Yoshi, aka Kitty Boy, and we were just talking and we agree that since you made it this far in the video, you might as well subscribe. You wouldn't want to disappoint Kitty Boy, would you?